Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. We're your hosts, Thomas
and Jeremiah.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. We are going to be doing full and complete driver profiles for every driver on the 2023 Formula One grid. I wanted to start the show, though, by kind of detailing what we expect this podcast to be. We did that a little bit in our first episode, but I wanted to give some more clarity to our recording schedule and what we plan on doing when the season starts. So, we plan on releasing full episodes like the first 3 every Friday, every week. When the race season starts on March 5th, we are going to be doing race recaps on Mondays, which will be shorter episodes that recap that week's race. Episodes 1 and 2 were definitely a experience for us figuring out the technology and the equipment and how to talk with microphones in front of our face. So if you watch those, absolutely thank you for spending the time doing that. We hope to only improve and get better from here. But with that, like I said, today we'll be doing full driver profiles, and then at the end, giving our own driver rankings 1 through 20 and going back and forth to see how they compare. With that, though, let's go ahead and get started with our driver profiles. Max Verstappen, number 1, Red Bull Racing. 25 years old, out of Belgium and the Netherlands. Verstappen is a 2-time World Drivers' Champion, winning in 2021 and 22. He claims records for the youngest driver to ever receive a full-time F1 seat at age 17, the most victories in a season, 15, and most points in a season, 454. Verstappen claims 3 home races, Circuit Zandvoort in the Netherlands, Spa in Belgium, and the Red Bull Ring in Austria. He is known for his aggressive driving style and unwavering confidence on track.
Max Verstappen.
2-time World Drivers' Champion.
2-time rule-changing world champion.
We're going to talk about that now. That's what we're going to do.
So if you don't know, Max Verstappen got in at a really young age before he was actually had a driver's license.
Yeah.
So his aggression, his style of driving was just way too much. And the FIA decided to make it a rule that you have to be 18 to be a driver in Formula One.
He joined at age 17, and now no one else can copy that.
He also has a rule change to where when you are behind a safety car, you can't get right up next to the other driver, right next to the one in front of you, and try and go for the overtake once the race resumes.
The second Verstappen rule.
So I've got a couple fun facts for you.
Hit me.
So did you know that in 2018, after the collision with Esteban Ocon, the FIA made it to where he had to do community service, I guess you could call it.
Okay.
But he was a race marshal, which are the guys that stand on the road, help drivers get out of the cars, help clear out the wreck mess and everything else. Sure. And he was a race marshal for the Monaco Grand Prix of Formula E.
What year?
2018. That same year that he had the collision.
Okay, so he was a on-the-rise driver that's now got to go to a Formula E event and clean up.
Yeah, and he sat there for hours.
Interesting. So I've mentioned it in a couple other episodes, but Red Bull is my favorite team. I'm not going to say by far, but they're my favorite team, and Max Verstappen is my favorite driver. And I understand that paints me as a bandwagon fan. However, I will add some context to my fan, dumb of Max. We started watching Drive to Survive, right? And that was the 2017 or 2018 season. And he was good, but he wasn't a podium finishing world champion driver. He was on the rise. He was a young up and comer. He was extremely aggressive on the track, it's what made me like him. He didn't even participate in any of the Drive to Survive seasons, right?
No, he completely opted out of them after he saw how they were kind of bending the way that he was being portrayed.
Exactly. I liked how they portrayed him as he wanted to be the number 1 driver at Red Bull. He was not shy about it. And he made it happen.
He did.
And anybody that got in his way, unfortunately, lost their seats until finally he got a teammate that could help him win in Sergio.
Right, and that bit about Sergio, it actually helped him to get that 2021 championship, which we're finally going to get into.
Yeah, so before you get into rule changes, because I know you're going to, Max won the 2021 World Championship. Him and Lewis entered the final race of the season at Abu Dhabi equal in points. It was like 394 and a half because they had a race that had half points awarded, and they both got a half point during that race. Sergio spent the better part of the middle section of the race literally just getting in front of Lewis and slowing him down.
That's right, because Max had to pit, and while he was doing the whole tire change and everything else before he got back onto the track, he had to hunt back down Lewis Hamilton. So they had Sergio out in front, the Minister of Defense, taking it to Lewis Hamilton, forcing him to slow down around the track, giving Max ample time to catch up.
And that's where you get the classic and iconic line, Checo's a legend.
Checo's a legend.
Over the team radio. But you have your own perception of the 2021 championship, at least the final race.
I do, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Please tell me how, in all of the races prior to this race, you either let the cars unlap themselves during a safety car, or you don't.
Sure.
There is no, we're gonna get the ones in between Max and Lewis out of here. That way Max has a clear shot at the championship.
Is that what Michael Massey sounds like?
That's exactly what he sounded like. No, Mikey, no.
Okay, that's what Toto Wolff sounds like. Okay, here's my explanation. And I think this is as solid as you need, and I think this is why it stands and why it counts. Back in the 2021 season and prior, the designated race director, which was the race director for the entire season, had full control over the FIA interpretations of the rules during the race.
Right.
They were the ones that the team principals would call in on a direct line to and ask to give advantages back, give positions back, assign penalties and all that. And that race director had final say. So if you're approaching the final 5 laps of the last race of the season, and the race director for the FIA makes either a rule change or a rule interpretation, that's what goes. No matter what the written rules say, that person decides the rules in the moment. And of course, they changed that going into the 2022 season, where now there's a rotation of race directors, and essentially it's like one person doesn't have final say in everything.
I just think that the only person that helped was Max Verstappen and Christian Horner.
That's fine. You can be wrong.
Sergio Perez, number 11, Red Bull Racing. 33 years old, from Guadalajara, Mexico, Perez is a 4-time race winner, with his best World Drivers' Championship finish, 3rd, coming in the 2022 season. 2023 will mark 3 years at Red Bull for Perez. Prior to 2021, Perez raced for Racing Point, Force India, McLaren, and Sauber. Perez's driving style is more reserved than that of his teammate, but he is able to strategically position his car where needed on the track to be the ultimate team player. Perez is known for having quality race starts, positioning himself in the points, and slowing down Lewis Hamilton in the final race of the 2021 season.
Let's talk Sergio Perez.
Ah, yes, as we stated, the Minister of Defense.
Which at some point in time you could Google up Mexico's Minister of Defense, and it would say Checo Perez.
Yes, I went into Google search and I just typed in Minister of Defense Mexico, and it popped up Sergio Perez.
So obviously Sergio has an extensive race history, multiple teams, and he was upper middle of the pack. I think everywhere else he was. He wasn't quite average. He was a little bit better than average, but he finally finds his way at Red Bull. And I'll add this before we get anything else about him. I think my favorite thing about Sergio is when you see those clips of him and the other Red Bull program drivers, Max and Pierre Gasly and Yuki, just kind of hanging out. And he's like the dad of the group. Yeah. But he's just there to hang out and have fun, but he clearly kind of sticks out a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. I got to say my favorite thing about him is probably got to be, well, I got 2. So the first one, obviously his amazing defensive abilities. Yeah. I mean, he's got to be one of the hardest racers to pass on the track at any given moment.
I think that showed, especially last year. Red Bull ran out some upgrades in the middle of 22 that worked really, really well for Max's aggressive style, but it kind of hindered Sergio because he lost pace and he had to be conservative the entire back half of the season and just hold position.
Right. He started finishing in like 6th, 7th, 5th.
Right. Instead of second,
third. Right. So the other thing that I really like about him is his ability to make tires last longer than I think anybody else on the track.
Yeah. And then he had again, we talked about it, the iconic 2021 holding off Lewis, whereas I think Christian Horner said he's like a dog with a bone. He just doesn't give it up or let go.
No, I've actually got a fun fact for you about Sergio as well. So did you know he actually has his own foundation?
What kind of foundation?
Yeah, so he has a foundation where he helps kids at risk with no resources. Maybe they don't have a place to live, they don't have the finances to help them out, or with disabilities.
Sure.
And he in Mexico specifically, because that's where he's from. But this foundation he set up, obviously he's not the one that's running it, but he's the one that funded it, started it, whatever.
Yeah.
I like it. I think that's a good look for a man like that.
That's really cool. And you can tell for especially like kids that are in that area, he's a hero.
Checo.
Yeah, awesome guy. I love Sergio. Charles Leclerc, number 16, Scuderia Ferrari. 25 years old out of Monaco, he is the first monogas driver since Beretta in 1994. Leclerc is a 5-time race winner, twice in 2019 and 3 times in 2022. 2023 will be Leclerc's 5th season with Ferrari. In 2016, Leclerc joined the Ferrari Driver Academy, where he served as the development driver for Haas, earned a race seat with Sauber in 2018, and was promoted to Scuderia Ferrari to start the 2019 season. Leclerc has extraordinary qualifying and race pace, earning 18 pole positions and 7 fastest laps. Leclerc and Ferrari look poised to dominate in 2022, going 1-2-1 in the first 3 races of the season. Ferrari's engine reliability problems and strategic missteps eliminated Leclerc and the team from the championship race. Leclerc is best known for a 2012 karting accident involving Verstappen, where Leclerc declared the event as just an incident.
Let's talk about Ferrari.
Scuderia Ferrari.
So let's talk Charles Leclerc.
Sure.
I love Charles Leclerc. The reason why is because when you think about stories in Formula One, there's always the main person and then his biggest rival.
Sure.
So yes, you have the Max and Lewis story, and that's always going to be a big one because you've got Lewis with 7, Max with 2, and counting. But where's Charles fit in that?
Yeah.
He's coming.
He's the next one.
Yeah, whether you want to accept it or not, Ferrari is getting better and better, and Charles is only getting better and better.
I think we're about to enter the age of, I'm not going to say Lewis is going away yet. That will upset people. But you're about to enter the age of Verstappen competing with Leclerc and Russell and possibly Sainz as well. And I think we're entering a new age where it's not just 1 and 2 drivers fighting for the championship. You could have 3, 4, 5 drivers legitimately fighting for a championship.
Yeah, I agree. With Lewis being 38 now, Fernando being 41, and them kind of being out the door, we're bringing in the new generation, and that is front-loaded with Max and Charles.
I'll call out something about Charles that we saw in the 2018-2019 seasons when he made the move from Sauber to Ferrari. He didn't really make a name for himself at Sauber, but this goes back to our conversation in episode 1. We were trying to figure out how do F2 drivers get kind of figured out and scouted.
Right.
The people at Ferrari, which Sauber, now Alfa Romeo, is a Ferrari engine team, they saw something in him at a young age. Maybe it was markability. He's the cool young guy from Monaco, but also he's a really good driver.
Oh, yeah. But I'll bet you didn't know that he test drove for Haas.
I did not know that.
Right. So you know how in the middle of the season, they'll do the practice 1 goes to the rookies.
Sure.
Yeah, that was Charles and Haas.
In the white Ferrari.
Yeah, in the white Ferrari. Carlos Sainz, number 55, Scuderia Ferrari. 28 years old out of Madrid, Spain, Sainz is the son of 2-time World Rally champion Carlos Sainz Sr. Sainz joined the Red Bull Junior team in 2010, driving in the Formula BMW, Formula 3, GP3, and Renault 3.5 feeder series. Sainz earned his Formula One race seat with Red Bull development team Toro Rosso in 2015 alongside Max Verstappen, scoring 18 points in his first season. After leaving Toro Rosso with 4 races left in the 2017 season, Sainz moved to Renault and then McLaren prior to joining Ferrari for the 2021 season. 2022 marked the first pole position and race victory for Sainz at the British Grand Prix, finishing 5th in the 2022 Drivers' Championship.
Carlos Sainz Jr., the second Spaniard on the grid, along with Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, Carlos Sainz is fun. He's a real fun driver to watch.
Smooth operator.
Smooth operator.
He's not my favorite driver, and I don't know why, but he's one of my favorite personalities, I think, on the grid. The fact, mainly just his team radio on race days. Obviously, just listening to the regular race broadcast where they play the clips from his a couple minutes after they happen, or the F1 TV situation where you can listen to him almost the whole time. He is not afraid to tell Ferrari what he thinks, especially about midway through last season.
No, and that was evidently clear when you saw Charles continuing to go by the master plan or master strategy, whatever they called it. And meanwhile, every time that they would try and get Carlos to do something, he'd be like, no.
Yeah.
Or like when they tried to get him tried to get him to pit when he was in the middle of a battle.
Yeah.
And he was like, not right now.
Yeah, because he was within a half a second. He had DRS set up and all that. And
they wanted him to box.
No.
What?
I think he could easily be competing up there, like I said, in the top 3 or 4 drivers. I think Ferrari has the car to do that. They did in 2022. The reliability issues and the strategy issues failed them, but he got his first race win last year. And I think in 2023, he could have multiple victories in multiple pole positions.
Yeah, to kind of tie back into what you said earlier about him being the best personality. I love Carlos Sainz as a person.
He's just cool.
I think that he might be my favorite personality on the grid. And I mean, think about that one qualifying session where he went out first and set a lap time.
But say I'm P1.
He goes, tell me I am P1. And he said, Carlos, you're the only one on the track. He goes, I know. Tell me I am P1. And he goes, you're P1, Carlos, purple in all sectors.
George Russell, number 63, Mercedes-AMG. 25 years old at the start of the 2023 season from Norfolk, England. Russell got his first and only Grand Prix victory at the 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Russell amassed 1 victory, 9 podiums, 1 pole position, and 5 fastest laps. Russell took first place in the BRDC Formula 4, GP3, and Formula 2 before earning a spot on the Williams-Racing Formula 1 team.
Like Mercedes.
Okay.
We'll start with George Russell.
Because he did finish higher than Sir Lewis Hamilton last season.
Yeah.
And he will finish higher than Sir Lewis Hamilton this season.
Or we can roll with my hot take.
I don't know about that.
And he wins number 8.
We'll talk about Lewis in a second, but George, he's in that next generation like we talked about with Charles and Carlos. He should be and will be competing with Max for the World Drivers' Championship. They scouted him early on and they put him in that Williams seat, right? And they knew he wasn't going to be there long. And I think they knew at Williams he wasn't going to be there long. But he did his time there. He definitely improved that team. And the second he gets called up to the big leagues, he shows his stuff.
So I think that we can both agree George Russell, very reminiscent of Lewis Hamilton in driving styles.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question, and you might not have the answer because I don't. Is that just a Mercedes thing? The finesse, not the slow playing things, but the strategical plays where you're aggressive?
I don't think so. And the reason why is because he was like that on Williams.
Yeah. He found his opportunities and took it, but didn't take over the top risks. He is a guy that will help them win championships.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I feel like, and this just could be because I am a Mercedes fan. Which
there's your bias. I called out mine.
Yeah. You have Red Bull, and that makes you a bandwagon currently. But I'm definitely taking the Mercedes bandwagon. Say what you will, I love them. I love the color. I love the drivers. Yeah. George Russell is exciting to watch, and the reason why I like him so much, like I was about to say, is that he is a number 1 driver in the number 2 spot for now. Sure. We'll see how that plays out. But I love the fact that they have 2 number 1 drivers.
I didn't care for him crying after he got his race win.
Lewis Hamilton, number 44, Mercedes-AMG. 38 years old out of Stevenage, England, Hamilton has 7 World Drivers' Championships, 103 race wins, 191 podiums, 103 pole positions, and 61 fastest laps. Lewis holds multiple F1 records, including most career wins, most pole positions, most career points, and most races finished in the points. He has also won at least 1 race in every F1 season that he's been in the sport up until last year, 2022, where he was not able to claim a win. Hamilton was a champion before entering F1, winning Formula Renault UK, Formula 3 Euro Series, and the GP2 Series.
Okay. One of the best drivers of all time.
Say it again. No, I'm sorry. Say that again.
One of the best drivers of all time. Make no mistake, he is great. I like Max Verstappen more. Sir Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, a 7-time world champion, up there with the Schumachers of the F1 world. There's no taking that away from him. As we talk about 2023, though, because that's what we're going into, I don't know quite where he falls.
Once you have that kind of that rival that, you've been sailing easy for the past 6 years, and then all of a sudden you have somebody coming up and trying to take it all away from you. You have a little bit of diversity. That's going to bring a better driver out of you. That's going to bring a better driver out of anybody.
It took so long for there to be somebody of his caliber of racer, or somebody that would actually challenge him, that we talked about the primes or peaks that a driver has, and we mentioned maybe Fernando Alonso is in like a second peak of his season, right, or second prime of his career, and there's the chance we see that with Lewis. Like you mentioned, you think maybe he wins number 8 in 2023. He would definitely have to find that thing again.
But I'm excited. No, I really am excited, because the kind of driver that he is, yes, while he's getting frustrated, you're going to hear some off-color things, just, him being frustrated with the car, maybe frustrated with his performance, and not necessarily projecting it onto others, but projecting it onto others.
One thing that both him and his teammate George Russell do, blame other drivers for their own downfalls.
Yeah. And here again, very reminiscent of Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah. Esteban Ocon, number 31, Alpine, age 26. Ocon is one of 2 Frenchmen on the grid for 2023, racing alongside the other at Alpine, Pierre Gasly. Ocon had a dominant karting career 2006 to 2011, winning 6 championships, his parents selling their family home to fund his early career. Ocon had 9 races as a Formula One driver for Manor in the 2016 season, prior to receiving a full-time race seat with Force India for 2017. Ocon raced with Force India and Racing Point prior to joining Renault in 2020, which later became Alpine. Ocon has hovered between 8th and 12th in the Drivers' Championship, claiming his only race win in 2021 at the Hungarian Grand Prix. He holds the record for most consecutive races finished from the start of a career with 27.
All right, so let's move to Alpine now. Let's go ahead and start talking about Esteban Ocon.
Sure. I think for these next 2, I hate to call them this, they are probably the most average, most middle-of-the-road drivers and team on the grid.
I'm going to take that further. Most unmarketable.
Oh.
Why? You have a French team with 2 French drivers. If you're not in France, you're not marketing that.
There's no international appeal to that team.
No, it's an all-French team.
Again, they finish in the 8 to 12 range every year in the driver standings. Alpine is finishing 4, 5, or 6 every year in the Constructors' Championship. There's not a ton to get excited for, except for maybe Alpine is making some engineering strides and they can boost Ocon up into that hemisphere of competing for championships. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at Ocon's teammates, whenever he was on, Force India, his teammate was Sergio Perez.
Right.
And then on Alpine, his teammate was Fernando Alonso.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are 2 pretty good people to go against.
Something that was telling, so that Alpine car last year, obviously they beat McLaren. They got 4th in the Constructors' Championship. Fernando Alonso was tearing it up.
Yeah, and Esteban was right there.
Yeah, he was always either the spot right behind him or just 2 or 3 behind him. Again, he was hovering in that kind of 7 to 10 range.
Well, sometimes ahead of Fernando Alonso even.
But they proved that the Alpine car could do something. So again, maybe if Alpine makes some engineering strides, we can see Ocon do something.
Pierre Gasly, number 10, Alpine. Age 27 out of France, Gasly comes from a racing family. His grandparents both into karting, with his grandmother becoming a karting champion. His father participated in karting, endurance racing, and rally car driving. Gasly was a late entrant to the karting scene at age 10, but made quick advances in the Formula Feeder Series starting in 2011. Gasly joined the dominant Red Bull Junior team in 2014, serving as a test driver for the Toro Rosso team from 2016 to 2017, and finally earning a race seat halfway through the 2017-2018 season. Gasly was promoted to Red Bull for the 2019 season, where he struggled to find points finishes. Because of this, Gasly was demoted back to Toro Rosso prior to Spa 2019, being replaced by Alex Albon. He continued with Toro Rosso as they transitioned to alphatauri for the 2020, 2021, and 2022 seasons. Gasly's best driver's championship finish came in 2019, where he placed 7th in the standing. Pierre Gasly!
I knew it was coming as soon as this popped up on the screen.
Look up.
So he has I'm not going to call it a troubled F1 history, but it hasn't been as smooth, I think, as a young up-and-comer at a time would want. So he starts off at Red Bull Junior team, goes to Toro Rosso, does really, really well in that Toro Rosso, and gets promoted, I think rightly so, to the race seat with Red Bull.
Yeah, here's the problem with that, though, is that I don't know if it was just the lights were too big, if it was just the moment was too big, if what it was, but it just felt like he couldn't connect with that car the way that he was with the Toro Rosso.
So here's my interpretation on the Gasly and Red Bull situations. He was only there for half a season, a little over half a season before they subbed in Albon, and Red Bull played that off as, we're going to test both drivers and see who's the better fit for Max, but that's not what they were doing.
No, what was actually going on was Pierre wasn't meeting the right specs. They needed him to be finishing higher so that they could take the constructors.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, they're not just trying to get Max to win the world championship. They're also trying to get the constructors. That's more money.
I think Red Bull is slightly at fault here in pushing Max and themselves back to champion status on both the driver side and the constructor side too early. They were looking for that partner, like you mentioned, that can help not only Max get the drivers, but the constructors. I don't think Red Bull was there yet when he was there.
See, I don't know if I agree with that, just because they needed to start making that push. Max needs to have that mindset from day one in that car.
Sure.
He needs it. It's the only way you're going to get world championships. You don't tell him, hey, this year we're going to kind of slack back a little bit, but next year you really got him, champ. Like, no, you're going to come in from day one with as much fire as possible. Where it went wrong, I believe, is that Pierre Gasly was the right person at the wrong time.
Yeah.
I just feel like he maybe wasn't ready for it, or like we said, maybe the lights were just too bright on him, or whatever it was. But the fact of the matter is if you don't get results, you don't keep the seat. That's how it goes.
Sure. And so he loses his Red Bull seat, replaced by Albon. They keep Albon for the next year, and they keep Pierre Gasly at then alphatauri, where they bring in Yuki Tsunoda, where I think he did about as good as you could do in that alphatauri car, getting in the 10 to 15 range most races.
That dude went off when he went back to alphatauri.
Especially in the Monaco race where he had like 8 overtakes.
Yeah. Well, it's the way that they did that is he went back down to alphatauri, but in reality, he should have stayed in that Red Bull seat. I don't know if he just started to figure himself out, get his confidence back. Yeah. But he had a dominant year when he went back to that alphatauri. I mean, people were talking about maybe, okay, let's try him again at the Red Bull seat because, Alex Albon's not necessarily working out.
Didn't work there either.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
I wonder if he thought, I hope that wasn't my only shot at a big-time F1 seat. I need to really market myself on the track.
I really, really wish that maybe not Red Bull keeping him for that entire year, but at least give him another shot after what they saw him do in the alphatauri car, because he put that thing up there. If I'm not mistaken, he got podiums. Well, podium.
He won a race, did he not?
Oh, he did win a race.
Yeah. Okay, so brief transition. We just had to look up and confirm that he had a win, because we knew that Esteban did in the Alpine, but we wanted to make sure he did in the alphatauri, and Gasly takes the Monza race in the alphatauri car.
Yeah, and then the year prior, he gets his first podium in 2019 in that alphatauri. So, like I said earlier, podiums.
I really like how we're fact-checking ourselves.
You got to make sure, man, because at the end of the day, they need the right information, and we're trying to have the right information. We're not trying to mislead anybody or do any kind of wrong information. We want to make sure that it's as right as we can get it.
All right, let's move on to McLaren.
Lando Norris, number 4, McLaren. 23 years old, out of Glastonbury, England, Lando has 0 wins so far, but has 6 podiums, 1 pole position, and 5 fastest laps. He came in first in his first year in FIA Formula 3 and second in his first season in FIA Formula 2. Lando started his F1 career in 2019 for McLaren and remains at the team for this upcoming season.
Lando Norris, the still young up-and-comer for the McLaren team?
Come on, man. He's 23 years old. You got to give him a break.
Yeah, we This was my third hot take, I think, out of episode 1. I think McLaren way over-invested in Lando. And again, is he good? Maybe. I might have been about to give him more credit than I think he deserves. He doesn't have any wins. He's got 6 podiums. He's been with them for a couple years now. He is top tier marketability in Formula One. We see that. He's a really cool guy. He's on Twitch. He's streaming everything. He's on every advertisement. But the dude can't get results out of those cars.
And that's kind of tough because, for one, the McLaren can't get results. Daniel Ricciardo wasn't able to, and Lando wasn't.
Yeah.
And the real problem with that is that I thought that these past 2 years with Daniel Ricciardo, we were finally going to get to see where Lando falls on that how good are you driving scale. But with Daniel Ricciardo not being able to figure out that McLaren, you didn't get to see what I wanted to see from Lando that season. I mean, you saw him race, you saw him get results, but without having I don't want to say competent because that kind of degrades Daniel Ricciardo, but somebody who's figuring it out.
Right.
Without having that, you can't tell where Lando falls because we already know that McLaren isn't keeping up with the Red Bulls, Mercedes, Ferraris.
Sure. And we know that Lando is set to make $20-something million a year. He has been. Look, we talked about how McLaren is a big brand. We don't know how McLaren is not better than they are in the sport.
Right.
We know that also the F1 team is not getting all of McLaren's worldwide revenue. So is his paycheck hindering them? I don't think so, but it's definitely going to be a call out for their future success. If he's not getting results, they've got to look at something.
I don't think it would hinder them just because they added the cost cap. So Mercedes, McLaren might have been one of those teams that, while might not be spending as much as Ferrari, is spending hundreds of millions of dollars.
Sure.
So when you look at Lando's money, it's kind of like, oh, who cares? Because the cost cap brought them down anyway. So
I think we need to see a lot more out of him in 2023. I'm not going to say he's going to get removed from his McLaren seat, but let's say Piastri comes out of the gate and just kills it. They're going to shift some attention to him just a little bit.
Right, but here's my problem with that. It's very rare that a rookie comes in and is just on it.
Yeah.
I mean, on it from day one. He's keeping up with his teammate, at least, if not beating him. And so it's going to be hard for us, again, to see where Lando falls on that how good are you scale, because here, again, his teammate is somebody who we don't know what he's going to do.
Right.
We don't know if he's going to bring a level of inexperience that's going to make it to where he has to figure out the car for the first half, which will hinder points, which will change standings.
Yep. I think with Piastri especially coming in, maybe it gives a little bit of a kick to Lando. Maybe Daniel Ricciardo was kind of not bringing him down, but Daniel Ricciardo was an older driver, way more experience, had way more ups and downs than Lando has seen so far. But with Piastri coming in, it's a new, young up-and-comer, maybe similar to the Max or Charles situation. Maybe put some drive into Lando.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing that's going to put a fire in you more than having some young pup nipping at your heels the entire time. That's going to be exciting to watch. I'm excited for that.
Oscar Piastri, rookie, number 81, McLaren. 21 years old, he will be the sole Australian on the grid, taking the race seat of fellow countryman Daniel Ricciardo. Piastri is the only driver to win 3 consecutive Formula Feeder Series, 2019 to 2021. Piastri served as the reserve driver for Alpine and McLaren while part of the Renault Sport Academy. He is best known in the Formula One world for his contract dispute with Alpine prior to signing with McLaren for the 2023 season.
Oscar Piastri,
the first rookie we're discussing.
And we covered a lot of Oscar Piastri as well as the other rookies in our first episode when we did our rookie breakdown.
Sure.
But, I mean, it's still going to be exciting to watch because you've got this young up-and-comer who, like we were talking about earlier, won Formula 3 in his rookie year, Formula 2 in his rookie year, and now here he is in Formula 1. What's he going to do?
Yeah, so again, tying back to the premise of our podcast, we're relatively new. Obviously, we've extensively watched the past 4 to 5 years of F1 through Drive to Survive and looking at all of the stats that we possibly can. We saw rookies live for the first time last year, I guess, with Zhou Guan Yu and a few others, but they weren't on the exciting teams like McLaren.
and exciting is relative just because they finished fifth in the
potentially
standings.
exciting. Has the potential, like, okay,
but I hear
Alfa
I hear you.
Romeo doesn't have the potential to be exciting.
Right, and there's no rookies that are going into the Red Bull seats, the Mercedes seats, or the Ferrari seats, so this is kind of as close as we're going to get.
Sure, and it's a team of two young drivers, 23 and 21, or 23 and 22. And again, you have another Aussie on the grid, which they always carry some kind of personality with them.
Yeah, that's weird how that worked out. We went from one Aussie to another Aussie unintentionally.
Does McLaren have like a contractual agreement with Australia to have one driver on the grid at all times?
No, I highly, highly doubt that. But it is still something that's pretty interesting, pretty cool. I mean, it's a little fun tidbit.
Sure. I want to round out the Piastri discussion with something we've touched on before, but his contract dispute with Alpine. I don't think that has any negative implications on him in the sport, but I do almost wonder why he fought with Alpine over this. And their only reason being, agree, McLaren is cool and they're awesome. They have the potential to be great. Alpine did have the better car.
Oh, yeah. So what I think happened is I think Oscar got, surprised.
Yeah.
Straight up. So I think he was expecting Fernando Alonso to return for another year.
Yep.
And it would be Fernando and Esteban, and he's another reserve driver. So, here comes McLaren. Hey, we're getting rid of old Danny Rick over here. How do you feel about filling his spot? And he's like, a race seat?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
With McLaren.
And then we come to find out Fernando leaves. So
Right.
a race seat opens up at Alpine, but he's already in talks with McLaren. So what happens? Radio silence.
Yeah.
Nothing.
And then Alpine, declares them his driver. He clearly doesn't go there, ends up going to McLaren. But we'll never know how he would have done in that Alpine car. And I will be even more so curious if Alpine finishes 3 or 4 in the Constructor Championship and McLaren falls down to 6 or 7 this next year.
Yeah, even if Alpine does another 4th place finish, if Oscar Piastri is part of that, that's impressive.
Right.
Valtteri Bottas, number 77, Alfa Romeo. 33 years old out of Finland, Bottas has 10 race wins, 67 podiums, 20 pole positions, and 19 fastest laps. He was a champion in Formula Renault 2.0 NEC, Euro Formula Renault 2.0, and GP3. 2013 was his first year in a full-time seat in Formula One for Williams Racing. From there, he moved to Mercedes, where he was a key part in helping Lewis Hamilton achieve 4 drivers' championships, as well as Mercedes win 5 constructors' championships.
Let's go to Finland. Valtteri Bottas.
Valtteri Bottas, the Alfa Romeo driver.
Sure. I love Valtteri Bottas, and I think the reason is because he played the role of Sergio Perez with Mercedes, helping Lewis, but whenever Lewis wasn't there to get the win or the points, he would swoop in and get it.
Right, and in that way you're guaranteeing 2 things. 1, either Lewis gets the win, or 2, Mercedes gets the win.
They get the points for sure. He is a good driver. There's no getting around that. Even when he takes the downgrade to Alfa Romeo, he got a lot out of that car, way more than they were getting before. He took a team that was finishing 13 to 18 in every race and brought them up into the points.
Right, and you can't really look at the 2022 season in terms of Valtteri Bottas because they had a lot of reliability issues. Right. So he had to retire from a bunch of races, and that just takes points away.
A lot of Ferrari teams had reliability issues.
Well, that's fair.
One of our little tidbits about Valtteri Bottas. So we play the Formula One video games, right? The F1 series, F122, F121. And we do the co-op career mode where me and Jeremiah are both on the same team competing and racing together. And every single season that we would run, and we ran 5 or 6 seasons in one of the careers, who won almost every year?
It was Valtteri Bottas, and it was almost every single race. It wasn't even just like at the end of the year. It was during the race. You'd finally work your way up the pack, and you get towards the top 5, and it starts to show who's in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And it's always Valtteri Bottas beating Lewis Hamilton.
He was ahead of Hamilton and Verstappen and Leclerc and everybody. And then I think one random season on there, we got the announcement in the game, Valtteri Bottas has retired. And we were like, what? Where did he go? And then like a season later, it was Valtteri Bottas returns with Williams.
Which is bananas in its own right, but...
He's a great driver. I hope he continues doing well with Alfa Romeo. Obviously not competing for championships at this point, but still producing for a team and helping them move up the grid.
Right. And I think at this point, his role is the development of the younger drivers. So
Sure.
if you look at what McLaren did, and you can't really use that as an example, I guess, just because of Danny Rick not figuring it out. But what they were trying to go for was you get one driver with ample experience who's done the dang thing and figured it out.
Yeah.
And then you have this young up-and-comer, which in McLaren's case was Lando. In this case is Zhou Guanyu.
Yeah.
And his role is to show Zhou the way around the track, the fastest way around the track, the best way to pass people without having any kind of collisions, any kind of problems, and getting through the race, getting points.
If I can get points, you can get points. And I think the best example is, I'm going to say it's Brazil, only because I have the picture of the onboard camera in my head, where Bottas was giving instructions to the team to give to Zhou about where to overtake Latifi, I think it was.
Yeah, so there was a turn where he said Latifi's taking turn, 14.
Too slow.
Tell Zhou to attack him there.
Yep.
And that was sweet.
That is being an on-the-track coach in real time.
I loved that. That is so cool.
Yeah. Zhou Guanyu, number 24, Alfa Romeo. 23 years old, he is the first driver from China to claim a Formula One race seat. Guanyu earned 5 karting championship podiums in 2013, including 2 victories. He has raced in the F4, F3, and Formula E series. He spent 3 years in Formula 2, with third being his best season finish in 2021. Prior to his Formula One seat with Alfa Romeo in 2022, Guanyu was a test driver for Renault and Alpine. He placed 18th in 2022, with his crash at Turn 1 in Silverstone being the most memorable moment.
So what about Zhou Guanyu? Let's get into him
Sure.
a little bit.
The only driver, I think, to have their home Grand Prix listed 3 or 4 times on the schedule before the race starts or before the year starts, only to have it stripped away.
Yeah, that's kind of sad because in terms of the video game, I love the Chinese track.
The Chinese track is so cool. It feels huge.
Speaking of, the first and only Chinese driver, you have to assume he's got all of China backing him.
Sure, and I think that's crazy considering the rich racing history that comes out of Asia, but credit to him, he's entering his second year on the grid. He's got a great teammate in Valtteri Bottas. We'll see what he can do.
Yeah, and we kind of added a little bit in one of our previous episodes where we threw in a little tidbit for people who are knowledgeable in Formula One, where we said, let's not ask Zhou Guanyu about Turn 1. Let's dive into that a little bit. So this man's car goes upside down as it approaches Turn 1, sliding right on through.
Yeah, that was at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. And just a quick aside, we've heard Silverstone and Silverstone. We're going to go Silverstone for now until someone yells at us and corrects us. But again, at Turn 1, the namesake of our podcast, he is upside down in the gravel going into a wall at well over 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, slaps the wall, starts spiraling upward, hits the top of the cage, and comes down. It was horrible to watch.
I don't want to diminish his whole season with just that, but he didn't really have any race results that were memorable, and so that was the thing that stands out from that year. And he walked away relatively unscathed, and I think that was the most eye-opening thing for us. Those F1 cars, as dangerous as they look, are safe.
Yeah. And I will say, granted, we started with Drive to Survive, which is the 2017 season, correct?
Yeah.
For the first one. So we saw crashes. We saw Roman Grosjean's crash, and we saw
The man on fire.
Yeah, we saw a bunch of others. But I think that this one was the first live and not in person, but the first time with us actually watching the races where we saw a crash of that magnitude.
Sure, and we saw in Monaco last year, Mick Schumacher split his car in half, but it wasn't near as violent. I mean, it looked like the car was made to do that. I know it's not, but
Right.
his crash, the car is not meant to do that.
No, it's not meant to go riding on its head, flying towards a wall.
And I think that ended my my argument on getting rid of the halo.
I will say Zhou Guanyu is one tough human being.
Yep. Hey everyone, Thomas here, co-host of the Turn 1 podcast. Just wanted to say thank you for watching part 1 of Turn 1 episode 3. We hope that you enjoyed the top 6 constructors from last year and their driver bios going into the 2023 season. We will be releasing a part 2 soon that contains the final 4 constructors, as well as our controversial driver rankings where we go 1 through 20, saying what we think about every driver. In the meantime, we ask that you follow us on all of our social media channels. We are at Turn 1 Podcast on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, Turn 1 on Facebook, or you can email us, trn1podcast@gmail.com. We are also streaming all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. Thank you for watching.